Hello and welcome. My name is Vartika Nanda. Today I'll be discussing with you something about interviewing skills and its relevance in journalism. Interviews are a standard part of journalism and media reporting. In journalism, interviews are one of the most important methods that are used to collect information and present views to readers, listeners or viewers. So where did the word interview come from? So the word interview is made up of two words, inter and view. This can be interpreted as between view or seeing each other. This means that both the groups involved in an interview get to know about each other. An interview can be defined as a gentleman conversation between two people or more, where questions are asked to a person to get required responses or answers. We can also define interview as a formal meeting between at least two people where the interviewer asks questions to the interviewee to obtain important information. Interview is defined as a formal and detail-oriented conversation between interviewer and the interviewee. So, why is it important in journalism? Journalists use the interview to expand upon the basic who, what, where, how, when and why of news gathering. You all know 5 W's and 1 H are the important requisites of journalism. Often we pay very little attention to this important skill of interviewing. But to be a truly effective journalist, it demands, we hope, we hone our skills to an art. This comes with practice and by following certain guidelines. So in an interview, who are the key people? Usually two groups or two individuals sit facing each other in an interview. The person asking questions is the interviewer and the person answering the question is the interviewee. In certain circumstances, more than one person can also interview the interviewee. So, we can define interview as a pre-arranged face-to-face meeting of a journalist who asks questions and an interviewee who answers them. So, which means it is a conversation between two or more people where questions are asked by the interviewer to elicit facts and statements from the interviewee. Interviewing is a learned skill and takes many years to perfect, and most of us are still mastering the art. It will be very interesting for you to look at different newspapers and you will be amazed to find that number of stories are actually based on an interview. The question and answer interview in journalism dates back to 1850s. Journalists have engaged in interviewing practices since the 19th century to collect information for news stories. Today, it is considered the dominant approach in news gathering among journalists. So, you can imagine the interview has existed and changed over time, both as a practice and as a methodological term in current use. The interview is one of the most popular style forms in journalism. In fact, it is said that journalism cannot survive without interviews because the information that you gather and the questions when you pose to a person, you are able to churn out stories which are far better than just a press release. But before you start an interview, before you plan for an interview, you must keep in mind the objectives of an interview. This is a must for every journalist, be it a new journalist or a seasoned journalist. So, what are the objectives that one should be always clear about? So, before planning and executing the interview, the journalist must be clear about the purpose. One must identify the reasons for conducting that particular interview. One should also clearly explore the type of interview that is needed to be done, and also where and how it has to be used. Let me elaborate on this point. Explore the type of the interview. It means what kind of interview you want to do. Is it going to be a planned long interview? Is it going to be a short interview, a telephonic interview, an office style interview, or an informal interview? Where do you want to do it? When do you want to do it? And for whom do you want to do it? If you are a freelance journalist, you must be clear. Where are you going to broadcast or print that interview? If you are working with a news channel, then you know that you are doing it for that particular news channel. But at the same time, you must know why have you picked up this particular person or this particular topic for an interview. Searching on the objectives will help in laying the format and preparing for the interview in a more professional manner. For example, interview in a breaking news situation will have an absolutely different tone and format as compared to a feature-based interview. Now, the tone that I am talking to you is a formal tone, but if there is a breaking news situation and if you have to interview somebody, then the tone and the style and the format will be very different, because the situation is emergent, something has happened, and you now need to do a story, a proper interview, so that it can be converted into a professional piece. A feature story or feature-based interview has a different format, style, tone, language. So, pace, language, style, urgency, delivery, location and purpose, everything will have a different setting, and answering all these questions before the interview is very important. So, interview is an art to collect information. The method could be qualitative, technique to understand the experiences of others. It could be a subjective understanding, it could be resource intensive, it could make news, and it generally concentrates on one point or one issue, so that the interview is focused and you know where you are coming from and what exactly you are looking for. But saying this is easier than doing it in a professional manner, because there are a number of types of interviews and every interview could have a different format. You can have a structured interview or a planned interview. Structured interview is also called a patterned or a directed or a guided interview. Here every single detail of the interview is decided in advance. Such interviews are always pre-planned. They are accurate and they are precise. So, the types of interviews are important for a journalist to understand properly, so that he or she is able to execute his job properly. So, there could be a planned interview, unplanned interview, a panel interview, group-based interview, specialized interview, or a telephonic interview. Sometimes minimal question school interviews are also done, or a freewheeling style interview. So, the unstructured or unplanned interview, in fact, number of times you would have seen such unstructured interviews, especially on television. So, in this case, interview is not planned in detail, but yes, you might have some kind of background detail in your mind, or you could know about the incident, or you could know about the particular format, the person that you are going to interview. That is a different thing. But you are not doing a structured interview because you do not have properly planned questions, and it has been done at the spur of the moment. Immediately there might be some emergency. Such interviews are also called as non-directed interviews. These interviews are unplanned and therefore they are more flexible. In such interviews, the interviewee might be more relaxed depending on the situation. But then there is another form of interview, which is a panel interview, in which a group of journalists take the interview. It could include 3 or 5 reporters. They ask questions to the interview. This generally happens in case of a politician, of somebody who holds an important position, where a number of reporters who are from the same beat or similar beat have questions to ask. Sometimes these interviews add a lot of value to the popularity and the credibility of a channel or a newspaper. Then there is the casual interview, personality-based interviews, news interviews and telephonic interviews. Some of these types are directly aimed at a news story, while others qualify to become a proper feature story or a soft story. Irrespective of the type of interview, elaborate preparation is essential. This is the key word, elaborate preparation, because without that you cannot have a successful interview. So in a casual interview, it can take place without any prior information or knowledge. A news source and a reporter can get this kind of interview on the street or at a seminar. Something that is said, often without premeditation or design, holds the potential to be converted into a news story or becoming part of one. One does not get time to prepare for such interviews, they just come. And that is the beauty of such interviews. Sometimes casual interviews become bigger stories than the pre-planned interviews. Then is the personality interview. Lots of people love to read such interviews because they focus on one personality, and generally that personality is a well-known figure. The personality interview is usually obtained for preparing a feature story and ordinarily does not figure in a news story. There is not enough space in a daily newspaper for such an in-depth interview, though there is always scope for an exception. The personality concerned may be a film star, a topper, a record holder, providing interesting storyline. Such stories have a wider target audience and arouse much needed curiosity and charm. But let me tell you, sometimes such interviews, though seen as a feature story, get converted into a big heart story, depending on what the person has said and the concerned person, the kind of background that person has. So let us say you are interviewing a person and you have thought it is going to be personality interview, but something happens on that day which is related to that particular personality, it might become a heart story. So thus, this interview again is a very crucial type of interview in the arena of journalism. Then there is the news interview. You are aware of such interviews, you have seen, you have read much about such interviews. The news interview is conducted on a one-to-one basis and fully focused on one issue or contemporary issues. Such interviews attract immediate public attention and are completely newsy in nature. Sometimes such interviews bring headlines to the newsroom. In case of a breaking news situation, such interviews bring forth the potential of giving birth to a number of side stories as well. So, you can see the potential of a news story and a news interview. Maybe you are talking to somebody about a contemporary issue, and what the person reveals to you is worth a big breaking news story. So such interviews have the energy to make a big story and at the same time also create certain side stories or feature stories. Then is it another type which is called the telephonic interview. This is one of the most crucial methods of collecting information. In the world of television news, this is called a phone-in or a phono interview. A telephonic interview can certainly save time, but it has its limitations. Such interviews do not build up a one-to-one conversation, and sometimes there could be technical glitches which can hamper the quality of the conversation. But nevertheless, such interviews are crucial. Let us say somebody is far away from your city and something has happened in that particular area. You can always do a telephonic interview and take an eyewitness account. This will save you a lot of time. This kind of technological advancement has helped in improving the quality of journalism and also adding to the variety in journalism. A pause of a few seconds in a face-to-face interview may bring inconvenience, but a long pause on a telephonic interview may spoil the taste and flow of the interview. This is one of the limitations that it has, because when you're talking to somebody on the phone and there are viewers who are listening to you, especially on a live telephonic interview and a live broadcast, and if the signals are not clear, or if there are long pauses, or if the audio is not very clear, it could be very, very disturbing. Also, since it is a faceless conversation, it becomes more formal as compared to a face-to-face interview, because in a face-to-face interview, you are able to record facial expressions. You see those expressions. You see very natural behaviors, and you are able to converse in a more natural manner. So, conducting interviews for news stories is a very professional skill that must be practiced by every journalist. An interview is also seen as a source that can provide the following elements that are vital to a news story. And the most important is basic factual information. Now, if you are a student of journalism, or if you are pursuing journalism, you would know that there are a number of beats in journalism. It could be crime, health, education, defense, police, environment. Now, for every beat, there should be some sources, because in the absence of those sources, you cannot develop a story. And interview in itself is a very crucial source, because it is authentic, it is primary, and it is one-to-one. So, while conducting an interview, these are some of the facts that you have to keep in mind: perspective, context on the topic, detailed analysis, direct quotes, contact details of other sources, and extra information. So, you must be clear the person you are going to interview will have his own perspective, but you should know what is the background of that particular story and the reason for interviewing that person. You must know the context of the topic that you have chosen. You must do a detailed analysis beforehand, and you must also analyze the interview that you are doing or you have recorded. You must have some direct quotes so that in case of a need, you can use it. This is especially applicable in print media, because for television, you are already taking a recorded version that you can easily edit and use it on the electronic media. So, what do you need for an interview? We have discussed that you should have a background in research. We have discussed you must know what is the objective of an interview and what you should carry: a reporter's spiral notebook, pens and pencils, a tape recorder or a digital voice recorder. But it is very clear that you must take prior permission before you record the interview. This is a must, and in fact, it is advisable that you must inform the person that you would like to record that interview. If it is for print, it is all the more essential, and if it is for television, the person would know that you will be carrying your camera along with you. A video camera for interviews you plan to also webcast and want to use it for multimedia. And now these are the terms that we all have been listening to, knowing about it for many, many years since we were acquainted with the world of journalism. Who, what, where, when and how, which we generally say 5 W's and 1 H. There are many basic points that reporters learn on the first day of journalism school. You need to revisit them while planning for an interview. You need to clearly work on every stage of the interview, from the planning stage to the interview stage, ending at the execution stage. So there are 3 stages of an interview, and interestingly, actually whatever we do, there are generally 3 stages, and for interviews essentially these 3 stages are important. The pre-interview stage, interview stage and the post-interview stage. So now let us discuss the first stage of the interview, which is the pre-interview stage, to understand the essential points that one has to keep in mind before the actual interview. So what will you do in a pre-interview stage? The first and foremost important thing is research. Do as much as research as you can. If you are going to interview a police officer regarding a crime story, then you must read in detail about that story and ensure that you understand the basic terms related to the subject, such as FIR, arrest, judicial custody, etc. You should also know about the jurisdiction, the officer concerned. You should know his badge. You should know why is this story important, what has been the past of this particular crime, if there has been, how did the crime take place, so that you are able to then proceed with the further details. And as I said, all the important terminologies must be clear in your mind. You must understand what an FIR is, what is judicial custody, what are the types of actually custodies, what is the role of a jail, what is the role of the police department, and how this kind of a crime, whatever story that you are going to cover, is important for the viewers to know or the readers to know. A well-prepared reporter inspires faith in the person being interviewed. This is crucial because if you are well prepared, the person who is going to answer your questions will also get the confidence that the person has done his homework. Must do your homework. Always remember that no one would like to waste time with an unprepared journalist. This could be highly irritating, and this could be seen as a journalist who is unprofessional towards his work. In fact, the other important point here is that if you do not go prepared, you might miss number of important things that you could have asked if you were prepared. So the moment you prepare for your story, do your background research thoroughly, you are able to go ahead with the coming details. In the pre-interview stage, you must prepare on every possible dimension. Write down points you want to cover during the interview and have them with you. Don't rely completely on your memory or on your mobile. There is no harm in taking a copy and a pen and writing down the crucial points. It will help you in referring to your notes during the interview, and the person you are interviewing will also get the impression that you have come completely, fully prepared. Type up those points and supporting information so that you are able to take maximum out of the interview. So in this lecture series, we are discussing about interviews, their types and their relevance. And in the next part, I'll be discussing with you about the other stages of an interview. Namaskar.